Okay, so welcome back. In the city of Clifton, there's been so many questions, about Passaic Valley Water Commission and the problems, and we're solving a lot of them. But with us tonight is Mr. Jim Mueller, he's the executive director of the Passaic Valley Water Commission. Jim, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Today we're going to try to learn a little bit more, and hopefully Jim explains what's going on. He's been here a few times to explain to the people, but today let's just start with, what are the challenges facing Passaic Valley Water?
So thank you for having me tonight.
Okay.
It's a pleasure to be here. So we have several challenges that we're facing. The first one, it's pretty typical in the United States and actually globally, which is aging infrastructure. We have pipes in the ground that are 80, 90, 120 years old. Some are not quite that old, but they're made of different kinds of material that maybe wasn't the best kind that when they were placed maybe 50 or 60 years ago. So again, assessing that, coming up with a plan to replace those pipes in a way that's fiscally prudent, but addresses the main problems is one of our key issues. We also have our treatment plant over in Little Falls and Totowa, and that's 25 years old. There's certain processes there that need to be replaced. And then we have our reservoirs, of course, that I'll talk to in a little bit. The second issue we have is regulations and ever-changing regulations. We are a water utility. We are regulated by the state of New Jersey and the federal government through the US EPA. There's a lot of different regulations. As testing and health impacts become more clear, regulations will ramp down, and we're trying to keep ahead of that. We're doing a lot of pilot testing and assessing our own capabilities in order to meet ever-changing regulations. The third piece is climate change. As we all know, storms are getting larger or more intense and more frequent. So how do we deal with that, both from a flooding perspective as well as power? In terms of damaging winds can knock out the local power utility, and how are we ready to continue our operations and sustain through that? And then finally, it's coordination with the utilities, the cities, Clifton being one of our owner cities, coordinating with that town in terms of the street work, paving, our own pipes, sewers, how all that's coordinated and prioritized. So those are the main challenges that we're dealing with.
Let me just ask you, the replacement pipes, what are they made of? Because they're obviously not made of cast iron anymore.
Right. So, ductile iron replaced the old unlined cast iron pipes in the 60s, but there was a lot of pipes placed in Clifton, particularly post-World War II, where you could see it in our history, the data we have on pipe age. It went up linearly after World War II as the area growed, and it wasn't as I've presented before to the city council. Certain areas of Clifton, just you can see it in the design. There's dead end loops in certain streets. It wasn't designed as a flow through, and it was just an artifact of the planning. I guess it happened in stages or maybe quickly, in the post-war baby boom era, and that's what we're dealing with now. So when we're going, it's not just pipe age, it's the design of the systems, trying to make that better from a water age perspective and delivering cleaner water to the customers.
Right. And you were mentioning flooding, because that's a big issue. Someone told me that 20 years ago we had 21 inches of rain a year, and now we're at 40. And how does that affect the reservoirs?
Right. So, in terms of the climate change and the flooding risk, when you have that much rain, we can have events of 2 inches, 3 inches in a day or in a few hours, which might equal a month of rain. How do you manage that water? We're working very closely with the county. We're also making sure our own drainage systems are kept in good working order to make sure we can handle that kind of storm water. We're also, as part of our regulations program, moving away from the open water reservoirs and building storage tanks. We plan to bid out the Levine storage tanks in the fall. That'll make us more resilient as well and protect from flooding risk.
So that would help with the tanks, because that's a big issue, because you're not going to add more reservoirs.
Right.
But the tanks, could you just explain a little, because I need to understand that.
Sure. So the existing open water reservoirs, they were built many years ago, decades and decades ago. That's no longer legal to have an open air finished drinking water reservoir. So we're replacing that with storage tanks, starting with the Levine Reservoir over in Patterson near the Passaic River. So we'll put in place 2.5 million gallon storage tanks and take that reservoir out of service, and then the system would float off the storage, and then we'll move through New Street Reservoir and then eventually Great Notch Reservoir. We're working on some different alternatives for each of these. It actually mixes with our pipe replacement program as well to make sure we have the right pipes and the system is hardened, the conveyance system is hardened, so that when we take reservoirs out of service to work on them, we can wheel the water around to the customers as they need it. So both programs, the pipe replacement program and the reservoir storage program, go hand in hand.
Okay, I appreciate that. And now I'm going to ask a couple of questions that if residents were here would ask.
Sure.
How do you coordinate with the utilities? Because, sometimes we hear, gee, Passaic Valley was here, they dug up the street, they paved it, 6 months later, someone else came in, PSE&G. So is there any way to rectify that? Or?
So we've initiated quarterly meetings with the city manager in Clifton. We do this with all our owner cities and retail areas, but with Nick Villano in Clifton, we meet with them quarterly. The city engineer will be there to just coordinate on our permits to make sure we're submitting the right information to the chief engineer of Clifton. There's certainly areas of improvement there that we're working on, and working with Nick and the team has been great. We're also meeting quarterly with PSE&G, and they do a lot of gas main work, or they'll do telephone replacements. There's a lot of work that they do in the area. We want to make sure we're well coordinated with them. Unauthorized hydrant usage also leads to a lot of discolored water because of that inrush of water. When there's a fire or something, you accept that because we're trying to protect property and public health. But for normal use, contractors in general should not be opening hydrants, particularly in vulnerable areas. We do have a quarterly flushing program where we'll go out to known problem areas like the Valley Road area, the Albion section of Clifton, and do proactive flushing. But when contractors will go out and stir up those hydrants, because some of those street activities not related to PVWC are water intensive, either paving or some other work that they're doing on gas line replacements, we'll try to, we want to address that. If folks do see that happening, we'd actually either call the police or call us, because it's not allowed. But we've been working very closely with PSE&G, to prevent that and better coordinate our work.
Right, because that's what I was going to ask. Who, you answered the question. If people see this, can they call Passaic Valley Water?
They sure can.
And is there a fine connected with this?
So each city is different. There's an ordinance in each city, and Clifton has one that actually prohibits the unauthorized use of fire hydrants. It's only supposed to be emergency staff like the fire department or PVWC staff. Those are the only ones authorized to touch those hydrants. So if you see a contractor on that, it's not allowed. And I don't remember what the fine is in Clifton, but that's administered by the cities. We've been started writing letters, working closely with Nick, notifying the contractors that they should cease that activity. And we've had people send in videos, so we'll have documented who the contractor was, which is very helpful, because we're trying to prevent that going forward.
Okay, and I guess the last, you answered a little bit, but just so people understand, you're continually doing things to minimize the brown water. So explain to the people exactly what we're doing, because I know it's a big issue, and I know you've been working on it, but so they can understand it, to understand that you are working on it.
No, it's a great point, particularly in certain vulnerable areas in Clifton, like the Albion section I mentioned. It can be stirred up for a lot of different reasons. A lot of that is those cast iron pipes that were put in post-World War II, the unlined pipes. So what we're doing right now is targeted flushing in those areas, whether it's dead-end loops or just in general a more systemic area. We just finished flushing over the weekend because we had a call in regards to complaints, and we went out there Friday night and flushed throughout the weekend. It did clear, so that area should be back to normal. We've also sampled in our own system at the reservoirs and didn't see anything out of whack there in terms of water quality issues. So it looks like our suspicion is, again, that local hydrant usage in that area that's vulnerable to discolored water because of tuberculated pipes, just the age of those pipes and the material they're made out of, they're prone to that. And eventually we just have to get in there and replace them. That's our longer term goal. But in the meantime, we'll keep this flushing going to make sure that discolored water gets flushed out when it does occur.
And just for my own edification, residents that call, they'll call you directly, maybe not you, but the office. Do we have a good rapport with Passaic Valley if customers do call?
Yeah, in general, we try to be as responsive to every single, whether it's a billing question, whether it's a discolored water issue, or any other issue, or just inquiries, in terms of what we're doing or work that we have planned. So we have an excellent customer service department led by Maria Malfa. We have audio on every call, so sometimes I do get complaints and I'll go back and listen to the audio. And quite often, Our staff are very professional. They're ready to work with people. If you do have a complaint, even if you might not understand what's going on, they're happy to talk to you, walk you through, or better understand your issue. So I'm very proud of our customer service staff. We spent a lot of time developing that group, making sure, and again, we use the audio recordings as a QA, quality assurance, to make sure they're getting the right messages out or dealing with people in the right tone. We'll call people back. I know Maria herself will call people and say, hey, are you still having that issue? We think we cleared it. You know, how is it on your end? And quite often they'll say, thanks for the call back, and that it does clear. Unfortunately, the type of system we have, the type of pipes we have, it's going to be a long-term kind of replacement. We are, as I mentioned at the council meetings, we have engineering contracts in place to develop a prioritized plan. We're making good headway. You know, I hope to have something, you know, in terms of what we're going to execute in the short term in the next few months, in terms of what those are, and then we just have to talk about financing and priorities and that kind of thing. But you know, we're getting there. We'll continue to target and flush to minimize the issue and get into the capital replacement longer term.
I appreciate all the information. I think when people call, even if they can't resolve the problem, they appreciate the respect of the call back or just to be answered. All they want is an answer, whether it's what they want to hear or not. They like to know that they're being respected. So, and I know you're doing that because I hear a lot of good things. So, Jim, I appreciate you coming on. Hope this helps the residents at home. Any questions, obviously, you could call Passaic Valley Water. So, Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you very
I appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.